My name is Geoffrey Pryor. I presently work in an organisation called the South East Resource Recovery Group, which is a group of councils in this area and includes the ACT. The project is designed to help councils look at the issue of waste stream management. Now, waste stream management often has a bad image because of smells or perhaps materials that are not useful, and yet actually it's an area of excitement and real possibility. I came to this job after having worked in my own company, and prior to that I also worked with Commonwealth Government at a senior level with Cabinet Ministers. So therefore I can offer perhaps some experience about the three spheres of business, namely private sector business, which is where I ran my own company, the Commonwealth and state government sectors and local government sectors, so therefore the public sector, and then finally the non-government sector, where I've actually done some work. So in each of those three sectors you need to have different skills, and within the public sector, for example in government, the three spheres of government require different skills. If you're looking, for example, to actually be interested in sustainability within the Commonwealth Government, the tendency is a bit towards policy. If you're looking at state government, you're looking both at policy but also how these policies might be implemented in practice. And at the local government level, what you're really looking for are people who are going to do things on the ground. Now, within each of those three spheres, however, there are some, I think, common characteristics about employment. Most importantly, always common sense. You can't be who you're not, but you can't be something that's actually out there that's not accepted. And I can think of a little story where a young guy I knew used to wear these wonderful ties which clearly inflamed the general manager, and eventually they parted their ways, not to the detriment of the general manager. So the point here is that in fact it's about thinking about the people that you work with. As I said before, it's really important for you not to be someone you're not. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, it means somebody who's got an active interest in the area in which you want to work. It means that you're going to put some effort and time into the subject matter, but it also means that you're going to take some time to think about the people you work with. Almost inevitably, government is about teamwork. I know this also is said in, about the private sector and the non-government sector, but really, as of today, I believe that the government sector is much more constrained. And it's not without reason. For example, you've got politicians keeping an eye on what you do in each of those three spheres. But secondly, you've got to handle public money, and public money needs to be accounted for. Therefore, you must be quite an honourable person in that sense. You've got to basically be able to say, I'm doing this within a framework that's established, and that framework is usually a policy, and you're committed to that. Your personal behaviours must be exemplary. Sadly, people keep watching you even outside your formal work, and they want to know what you're doing as an informal job. Therefore, keep an eye on your Facebook, and I think the Facebook issue is really one that you need to take care of. If you're working at a state government level, you might find that the same sorts of pressures apply, but the policy focus is probably not as much as the practical. And certainly if you're working in local government, then you've got to be able to say to people, look, I think we can do this on the ground, we can make it work, and it's going to be an idea that will actually work. Now, it's easy enough to say we've got lots of ideas and enthusiasm, and I'm a great supporter of people with enthusiasm. But sadly, I think as you work within the confines of the public sector, you have to be able to curb those enthusiasms and know when to channel that energy and when to perhaps take a step back. So that's the public sector in brief. I should say you need to have very good reading skills. You really need to be able to have a capacity to arrive on time, and you will certainly be required to do that. You might have to deal with some strange individuals as you see them. They might see you as strange as well. But the fact is, you work as a group and you've got some particular tasks to achieve, and that you have to work your way through the personal and the policy and the practical, given that you won't have a budget that's going to be unending. Now, within the private sector, this is quite a different kettle of fish. And I think if you speak with people who've worked in the private sector and ask them about what they know of government, Well, it might not be as comprehensive as you could imagine. So oftentimes people actually have a misunderstanding from seeing the government sector when they work in the private sector. And I only say that to highlight the difference. Now, the private sector really is about ensuring that the organisation you work for gets a return on profit. We are also seeing, fortunately, a wider discussion about some of the social responsibilities of enterprises. So I think it's quite an interesting time to enter into the private sector. You also need to know, though, that there are going to be people under quite a lot of stress as they actually work to achieve the goals of the company, which actually not only are doing things well and cost effectively, but they're doing it in such a way that there will be long-term positive ramifications in the area in which they work, so that the quality and the reputation of the organisation is such that you actually continue to attract clients. Now, personally, you need to have some of the same qualities as any organisation. Mostly, you should be yourself. You should have enthusiasm. You should have some knowledge. But you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and I think that ratio is actually quite a valuable ratio. You need to listen very carefully, and you need to be able to then articulate your views in an appropriate manner and at a suitable time. Therefore, what I think is really interesting in the private sector is the way in which you do presentations. In the public sector, you've got a chance to spend some time writing and discussing and elaborating. In the private sector, sometimes you have to do that, but you may not have the opportunity to do that. You may find people are rushing around at a high pace, and they want a succinct, clear summary of what it is that you're trying to say to them, or in response to questions that they've actually asked. The way in which you might actually work within the private sector organisation may not be that different in some ways, but it can be very different. The atmospheres can be much more competitive. You might find that people are coming into the business area that you're working in from angles that you don't actually expect. And obviously companies are employing you not only to be a person there on the spot, but perhaps also to begin to offer new ideas and to begin to take initiatives and to find gaps in the skill sets that the company doesn't have. If I can jump now to the non-government sector, this is a different issue altogether. As you know, the non-government sector is really about social aims. That's not to say that therefore they're not efficient or they're not conscious of doing their job in a very professional manner. They are. But personalities and the way in which you work have a higher profile. The whole purpose behind a non-government organisation is to achieve a social outcome. When one enters into that area, it's very useful to be able to work very well with people, and these people may not necessarily be skilled themselves in working in groups. So it's a valuable skill to have. It's a valuable skill to really be able to be patient. It's a valuable skill to be able to look around and see where you might make a difference by offering suggestions, and then really importantly to be able to share a load which may not necessarily be in your original job description. In the public sector, you know well pretty clearly where you sit, because the job descriptions are set down, and that's what's required of you, and you'll be asked to perform against that. In the private sector, you will have that to a lesser degree, and there's perhaps more scope. In the non-government sector, you may also have this particular requirement, but I think it's much less likely, and that's because the sort of people who are working there have got, I guess, a different set of goals, and organisationally they're not going to be arranged in such a, I guess, a formal way. So I've mentioned structures and ways in which you're working. I haven't really talked a great deal about the subject matter that interests me. I came to be interested in sustainability many years ago, and of recent years I've been interested in actually sustainability because it's a word that not many people really understand. In fact, somebody once told me that there is as many as 300 definitions of sustainability. No wonder people don't really understand it. But if you take something such as my interest actually in the waste stream, then what you can do is make this subject really quite immediate. Almost nobody, I hope, doesn't understand what it means to actually dispose of materials. It's actually then all the range of questions which come from thinking about this idea of disposal. For example, what did you want to buy? What did you buy? Where did you buy it? How did you use it? And then if you used it, what did you do with it when it came to its end of life? Now, if you're interested in those sorts of areas, they cross quite a range of skill sets. First of all, a general questioning skill set. Secondly, a knowledge base around materials and transformation. Thirdly, an issue around about cost, because this world is not such that you can actually just take stuff and not pay for it or not pay a reasonable cost. Thirdly, or are we up to fourthly, then basically you need to be able to deal with people in their situation. So a person who's on a high income may well be quite disposed to throwing materials away in comparison with people who don't have such a high income and who may indeed have a different set of values. So the sector that I'm interested in actually is, I think, an exciting one because it enables people to come to work in all those different three sets of, I guess, organisational structures, but not with any one overriding skill. If you're a scientist and you're interested in plastics, there's a variety of jobs for you there. But if you're an artist and you really want to be able to enjoy creating, well, you'd be surprised how many materials and how many artists work with materials from the waste stream and create really fabulous materials. So I guess in summing up, if there was one message that I really had, it would be yourself, but be a bit conscious that actually requires you to work with other people. So being yourself totally is not necessarily the way to go.